Let's face it, life is unpredictable. Your plans get canceled, your favorite show gets ruined by the final season, and your Wi-Fi. It always dies at the climax of the movie, but there is one thing that never fails to show up on time: death. Now, ancient cultures didn't see death as just a final stop. Oh no. To them, it was more like an immigration office. Divine paperwork, structured, ritualized, staffed by gods and spirits who'd seen it all, and who frankly weren't here for your excuses. Some weighed your heart, others dragged your soul through rivers, mountains, or frozen wastelands. Some offered peace, others preferred chaos, and each of them told humanity the same thing: you don't just die, you transition. In this video, we're diving into the world's most powerful and sometimes unsettling figures associated with death, the gods of the afterlife, the gatekeepers of judgment, the ones who guide, who guard, and who remind us that dying is just the beginning of a very strange new chapter. So, take a breath while you still can. If you wanted a smooth trip to the afterlife, you wanted Anubis, jackal-headed, calm, meticulous, the god of embalming and funerary rituals. He wasn't there for drama, he was there for order. Think of him as the afterlife's quality control manager. Except instead of checking factory products, he checked your soul. Preserving the body was everything for the Egyptians. If your earthly shell fell apart, your afterlife was in danger. That's why Anubis oversaw mummification personally. Every wrap, every amulet, perfect. Because eternity is a very long time to spend with a bad embalming job. But his role didn't end there. Anubis guided you to the Hall of Matent, and there, your heart was weighed against a feather, the feather of truth. If your heart was light, free of corruption, congratulations, you passed the cosmic test. You could walk on to paradise. If not, say hello to Ammit, the devourer of souls, a beast part lion, part crocodile, part hippo. Yes, 3 halves. Because mythology doesn't care about math. Anubis wasn't cruel, he was fair, a protector, a silent escort who made sure the good could find peace, and the guilty got what they deserved. Now, Osiris. His story? It's mythological soap opera at its best. He was once a mortal king, beloved, respected. Then came his brother, Set, jealous, treacherous, and violent. Osiris was murdered, cut into pieces, and scattered across Egypt like some very grim treasure hunt. But Isis, his wife, wouldn't let that be the end. She gathered his body, reassembled him, brought him back with her magic. And so, Osiris rose again, but not as a king among mortals, as the god of the dead. And here's what makes him so powerful. He didn't rule with bitterness. He ruled with empathy. He knew betrayal. He knew suffering. He knew death itself. And that made him a just and merciful king of the underworld. To the Egyptians, Osiris was more than a ruler. He was rebirth itself. Like the Nile's flooding that brought life back to the soil each year, Osiris symbolized the cycle of life, death, and renewal, cut down, restored, eternal. From Egypt to Greece, we find a very different face of death. Meet Thanatos. No scythe, no fiery speeches, no grand monologues about doom. Thanatos was quiet, gentle, peaceful death personified. Born of night and darkness, he represented the softest kind of ending. The death feels like falling asleep, fitting, since his twin brother was Hypnos, the god of sleep. Thanatos didn't come early. He didn't break rules. He showed up when it was time, extended his hand and walked you calmly to the underworld. But try to cheat him. Bad idea. Sisyphus once chained Thanatos, thinking he could escape death. For a moment, no one died. Sounds fun, until the world filled with the undying and the gods got angry. Thanatos broke free, and Sisyphus ended up pushing that boulder uphill forever. A cosmic reminder, you can't outsmart death. For most souls though, Thanatos was no villain. He was the gentlest companion you could hope for at the end of your journey. So far, we've met the guides, the judges, the gentle escorts. But who rules the underworld? Who sits on the throne once you've crossed the veil? Every kingdom needs management, and in mythology, management usually means powerful rulers with family drama and complicated reputations. Let's step into their domains. Poor Hades. Say his name, and most people imagine horns, flames, and a pitchfork, but that's Hollywood, not mythology. In truth, Hades wasn't evil, he was responsible. When he and his brothers divided the cosmos, Zeus took the sky, Poseidon took the sea, Hades got the underworld. Not exactly glamorous, but someone had to do it. His realm wasn't torture and fire, it was order. Everyone went to Hades. Heroes, farmers, kings, children. Inside his kingdom were different regions. The asphodel meadows, neutral, endless fields for ordinary souls. The Elysian fields, paradise for the virtuous, and Tartarus, the abyss for the wicked, and the Titans, who crossed the gods. Hades wasn't a tyrant. He was fair, stoic, neutral, rarely leaving his realm except for one famous incident, the abduction of Persephone. Persephone began as the goddess of spring, youthful, radiant, flowers blooming in her wake. Then Hades appeared. He seized her, dragged her into the underworld, and Demeter, her mother, the goddess of agriculture, was furious. Demeter's grief froze the world. Crops withered, the earth starved. She demanded her daughter back. The compromise: Persephone would split her time, half the year above with her mother, half the year below as queen of the underworld, and so the seasons were born. But here's what matters most. Persephone changed. She wasn't just a stolen maiden anymore. She became a queen, commanding respect, ruling beside Hades. Her myth is duality itself, life and death, growth and decay, innocence and power. Persephone shows us that endings create beginnings. Winter always returns to spring. Now to the north, where winters are long and death has its own cold queen, Hel, daughter of Loki, banished to rule the underworld that shares her name. Her appearance, half alive, half corpse, one side beautiful, the other decayed, a living embodiment of the boundary between life and death. Her realm, Helheim, wasn't fire or torment, it was cold, misty, reserved for those who didn't die gloriously in battle. Farmers, children, the old, the ordinary. While Odin gathered heroes for Valhalla, Hel kept everyone else. She didn't punish, she didn't reward, she simply reigned. Her rule wasn't cruel, it was inevitable. A reminder that not all deaths are heroic, some are quiet, and they matter just as much. Odin, chief of the Aesir, seeker of wisdom, father of gods, but also recruiter of the dead. On the battlefield, Odin selected warriors to join him in Valhalla, the great hall of the slain. There, the Einherjar trained, feasted, and prepared for Ragnarok, the final battle of the world. Imagine it. You die in combat, then you wake in a golden hall. Mead flows endlessly. Each day you fight, each night you rise again to feast. For a Viking, this wasn't punishment, it was the dream, eternal honor, eternal purpose. Odin himself sacrificed for wisdom, an eye at Mimir's well. Days hung on Yggdrasil, the world tree. He sought knowledge of death. He sought the voices of the dead. Unlike Hel's passive rule, Odin's bond with death was active, strategic, purposeful. He didn't just accept mortality, he weaponized it. So far, death has been a ruler, a guide, a quiet escort. But for many cultures, death was more than that. It was a courtroom, a terrifying skeleton, a shadowy figure in the night. Or, surprisingly, a drunken trickster in a top hat. Let's meet the gods who prove that death isn't always silent. Sometimes it judges, sometimes it terrifies, and sometimes it laughs. If death were a court, Yama would be the judge, the bailiff, and the executioner. In Hindu tradition, Yama rides a black buffalo. He carries a lasso, and when your time comes, he pulls your soul straight out of your body. Efficient, unavoidable. But he isn't cruel. Yama is justice itself. In his hall, every deed you ever did is read aloud by his scribe, Chitragupta. The record is flawless, no editing, no excuses. Do good, you move forward. Do evil, you face punishment or return for another life. Reach enlightenment, you escape the cycle entirely. In Buddhism, Yama takes on a darker tone. Sometimes he rules over hell realms, yet even then, he isn't the villain. He is balance. A reminder, choices matter, long after you're gone. From India to ancient Mexico, picture a god stripped to bone, his body skeletal, his necklace made of human eyeballs, his throne in the deepest pit of the underworld. That is Mictlantecuhtli. He ruled Mictlan, the final destination of most souls. But getting there, Brutal. It took 4 years of trials, mountains, rivers, collapsing cliffs, a journey so hard it mirrored life itself. Only after enduring every hardship could you reach Mictlantecuhtli's domain. And when you did, he wasn't there to torture, he was there to keep order, to guard the bones, the seeds of life itself, which could be used for creation again. Terrifying, yes, but also essential. He wasn't just an end, he was the recycler of existence. Every king of the underworld needs a queen. In Aztec belief, that was Mictlantecuhtli, skeletal, regal, the lady of the dead. She ruled alongside Mictlantecuhtli, making sure souls reached rest. But her role wasn't only judgment, it was remembrance. She presided over ancient festivals of the dead, rituals that evolved into Dia de los Muertos. On those days the dead could return, families welcomed them with food, drink, and offerings. Love crossed the barrier of life and death. Mictlantecuhtli wasn't fear, she was continuity, proof that death doesn't erase bonds, it transforms them. In Japan, death wasn't ruled by one god. Instead, there were the Shinigami, not gods in the strictest sense, more like enforcers. They arrive when your time is up. They guide you to the afterlife. Sometimes, they even nudge you toward death when fate has decided. Shinigami aren't purely good or evil, they're ambiguous. In some stories, they're cloaked and eerie. In others, abstract, faceless, unknowable. Their purpose is simple: keep the cycle moving. Life, death, rebirth, over and over. In a culture that reveres ancestors and respects the thin line between worlds, Shinigami are the quiet whisper that life is fragile and the end is always waiting. Now for a god who completely breaks the mold: Baron Samedi, top hat, tailcoat, skull face, a cigar in one hand, rum in the other. He rules the crossroads of life and death in Haitian Vodou. But unlike most gods of death, Baron Samedi is outrageous, loud, obscene, funny. At funerals he mocks, he laughs, he drinks, he dances. But his role is serious. He ensures souls cross safely, the dead are honored, and that restless spirits don't harm the living. Baron Samedi is shocking. He carries a truth: death is inevitable, so live while you can. Laugh, celebrate, indulge, because one day the Baron will come for you with a grin and a toast. We've seen judges, we've seen guides, we've seen tricksters, but the underworld is vast, and death wears many more faces, some tied to wealth, some to war, some to destiny itself. This is the final descent. To the Romans, the god of the underworld was Pluto, but unlike the later Christian devil, Pluto wasn't fire, torment, or eternal punishment. His image was tied to riches. His very name comes from Plutus, meaning wealth, because beneath the ground, hidden from sight, lay two things: bodies of the dead and the treasures of the earth: gold, silver, fertile soil, minerals that shaped empires. All were Pluto's domain. So while he ruled the underworld, he was also the guardian of abundance. For the Romans, death was not only the end of breath, it was also renewal, a cycle, life returning to the ground, and from the ground, life springing again. Pluto wasn't feared as cruel, he was respected as inevitable, a ruler of shadows and of hidden gifts. Few gods carry the raw intensity of the Morrigan. To the Celts, she was the Phantom Queen, a goddess of war, fate, and sovereignty. Her presence on the battlefield was both omen and judgment. She often appeared as a crow circling above, watching. Sometimes she landed on the shoulders of warriors destined to die. But she wasn't only a bringer of death, she was also protector of the land, a figure who ensured that blood spilled in battle wasn't meaningless chaos, part of a greater balance. Morrigan was also complex, sometimes described as a trio of sisters: Badbob, Maka, and Nemain. She embodied different faces of war, fury, and chaos, fertility and sovereignty, death and destiny. To encounter her was terrifying, yet to honor her was sacred. She was the voice of fate itself, and fate, like death, cannot be escaped. While the Morrigan embodied war, the Welsh told of a different kind of ruler, Aron. He reigned over Andan, the otherworld, and unlike fiery underworlds, And was lush, peaceful, abundant, no hunger, no sickness, no decay. It was in many ways a paradise. Aron was fair, honorable. His role was to keep balance. Souls entered his domain not for torment, but for rest. His justice was measured, his power quiet but immense, yet his presence was still felt in the world of the living. His spectral hounds, white with red ears, were said to hunt across the skies during autumn and winter nights. Their howls carried a chilling message. Death was near. Aron wasn't fear, he was transition, proof that the afterlife could be peaceful if the ruler was just. In Mesopotamia, the underworld was called Kala, and at its throne sat Ereshkigal. She was the queen of the great below, absolute, stern, inescapable. Every soul, no matter their station in life, descended into her realm. Kings, farmers, heroes, villains, all equal beneath her gaze. Her realm was dark, silent, and inevitable. She did not deceive her worshippers with promises of paradise. Death was final. It was hers. She did not rule alone. She shared power with Nergal, her consort. He was the god of war and plague, fierce, destructive, terrifying. His role was to remind mortals, death doesn't come only with age. It comes with violence, with sickness, with fire and blood. Together, Ereshkigal and Nergal were balance. The cold queen and the furious warlord, not kind, not forgiving, but honest. They ruled death as it truly is, inevitable, often harsh, but always necessary. From the shadowed lands of Slavic myth comes Chernobog. His name means simply, the Black God. He wasn't death itself, but the force of darkness, misfortune, and calamity. In myths, he is described as a figure of gloom, associated with winter nights and ill fate. His counterpart was Belobog, the white god of light. Together, they embodied duality, light and dark, good and bad, fortune and misfortune. Chernobog wasn't adored. He was feared. He received curses, not prayers. During rituals, people would invoke him to carry away evil, disease, and despair. He was the absorber of misery, a figure you didn't worship, but one you had to acknowledge. In the mythology of the Maya, death had a name, Puchu. He ruled Mitnal, the lowest and darkest level of Sibolba, the underworld. His body was skeletal, ribs exposed, his hair adorned with bells. His companions were owls, creatures seen as omens of death. He was decay, disaster, disease. His presence was often announced by dogs howling into the night. But like many gods of death, Puch wasn't only destruction. He was part of the cycle, the one who kept the balance between endings and beginnings. For the Maya, bones and decay were not just remnants of life. They were seeds for renewal. To fear Puch was natural. To respect him was survival. Among the Yoruba, death wasn't just ruled, it was personified. Iku was death itself. He wasn't cruel, he wasn't merciful, he was impartial. He came only when the supreme god Olorin decreed it, not a second before, not a moment after. This gave death a sense of destiny. Life was predetermined. And when Iku came, it was simply time. Rituals to honor Iku weren't about stopping death. They were about accepting it, about making peace, about understanding that life's journey always ends in his presence. In the Andean world, the Incas told of Supay. He ruled Olco Pasha, the inner world. His domain was vast. It contained both the spirits of the dead and the treasures hidden underground. He was feared. His appearance was fierce, his reputation terrifying. He commanded spirits called Supay-kuna, demons that carried out his will. But he was also respected, because Supay wasn't only death, he was also the guardian of the earth's wealth, minerals, jewels, resources that gave life and power. Supay embodied the paradox of death, both dangerous and necessary, both terrifying and protective. On Mount Majas, high above the land, lived Sadapa. He was not the god of sudden violence or chaos. He was the god of time itself. He kept a sacred tree, and on its bark were written the names of every mortal. Alongside each name was a mark, the moment of their death. When that moment came, Sadapa acted, calm, detached, absolute. His presence reminded mortals that life is finite, that destiny is carved into the fabric of the universe, and that death is not random. It is written. In Lithuania, death took the form of Giltin. Early tales describe her as gentler, a caretaker of endings. But over time, her image grew darker, perhaps influenced by neighboring cultures. She became skeletal, cloaked, her weapon, a scythe. Like the Grim Reaper, she harvested souls, not with cruelty, but with inevitability. Her presence wasn't about fear, it was about truth, that all things end, that life is precious, because it cannot last forever. Korean folklore gave us Jeosung Saja. Unlike many death figures, he wasn't terrifying. He wasn't even particularly mysterious. He was a messenger, a cosmic clerk. His task, escort souls to the afterlife, ensure the records matched, confirm that every life had ended at the right time. No drama, no cruelty, just order. He represented the idea that even death must follow rules, even in the afterlife. There is structure, a system, a balance. Finally, we end with Angra Mainyu, also known as Ahriman. In Zoroastrian belief, he was not simply death, he was destruction itself, the eternal enemy of Ahura Mazda, the god of light and wisdom. Angra Mainyu embodied lies, corruption, chaos. He twisted creation, he spread suffering. He was the great shadow of the world. To the Zoroastrians, life was a cosmic battle. Every choice mattered. Every act of good fought back against Angra Mainyu's influence. He was not a judge, not a guide. He was the enemy, the embodiment of everything that corrodes life. Across Egypt, Greece, India, the Americas, and beyond, we've seen death personified as a king, queen, a judge, trickster, a shadow, a balance keeper. And what do they all have in common? They prove that humanity, everywhere, needed to make sense of the inevitable. We gave death rules, personalities, stories, because the unknown is terrifying. But a god with a face, even a skeletal one, feels easier to understand. Death isn't just the end, it's judgment, renewal, laughter, balance. It's the reminder that life matters, because it ends. So the next time you think about mortality, remember, every culture has told us the same truth. Death is not just a closing door, it's the threshold to something greater, stranger, and endlessly fascinating. And if you enjoyed this journey through the world's gods of death, stick around. There are countless myths still waiting to be unearthed. After all, the underworld is never short on stories.